A decision is being made in Texas right now. A decision that will determine who keeps their jobs, who can turn on their faucets, and which communities will be left with nothing but dust. It is a slow-motion catastrophe unfolding under a relentless sun. Two water laws, one for the sky and one for the earth, are colliding in real time. And in the middle of it all, a major American city is about to run out of water. The question is no longer if this will happen. The question is who gets cut off first. The law says one thing, history says another. It's a conflict that pits neighbor against neighbor and city against industry. And we want to know what you think, in a crisis, who should have the right to water? The farmer who grows our food? The city where people live? Or the industry that powers our economy? Let us know in the comments. We read them all. Let's begin. A huge number of people watch our documentaries, but a shocking percentage are not subscribed. If you believe this kind of deep dive reporting is important, take 1 second to hit that subscribe button. It is the single best way to ensure you don't miss our next investigation as we track crises like this one. It's a small click that makes a massive difference for us. Please, do it now. The crisis has an epicenter. A name. Corpus Christi, Texas, a coastal city home to America's largest crude oil export port, surrounded by the ocean that is mathematically running out of fresh water. Its two main reservoirs, the sources that keep the city and its industrial heart alive, are draining. One of them, Choke Canyon Reservoir, sat at a breathtaking 8.3% capacity as of this summer. Not low. Catastrophically empty. Late spring rains offered a brief, fragile reprieve for the second reservoir, but it was not a solution. It was a pause. City Manager Peter Zanoni and Mayor Paulette Guajardo are now staring at a projection for a level 1 water emergency by the start of 2027. Mandatory cuts. A city on the brink. How did it come to this? How can a modern city, an economic engine for the entire country, be just months away from having its water supply choked off? The answer lies in a legal paradox written over a century ago. A contradiction so fundamental it has set the entire state of Texas on a collision course with itself. To understand Texas water, you have to understand that it is governed by two completely different and deeply incompatible sets of rules. One for the water you can see, and one for the water you can't. Surface water, the water in the rivers, the streams, the lakes, is owned by the state. It is public property, allocated under a legal doctrine called prior appropriation. The principle is brutally simple. First in time, first in right. If your family built a farm and claimed a water right on the Brazos River in 1890, you have a senior right. If a city was founded and claimed its water right from the same river in 1950, it has a junior right. In a drought, when the river runs low, the state's environmental agency, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, or TSEC, is legally obligated to call the river. To cut off the junior rights holders one by one, in order of seniority, until the river's flow is restored for the oldest, most senior users. The farmers from 1890 get their water. The city from 1950 gets nothing. It was designed to bring order to a dry land. A clear, rigid line of succession. But then, there is the water underground. The vast aquifers hidden beneath the Texas soil. That water is governed by a completely different law. The rule of capture. This rule, established by the Texas Supreme Court in 1904, is not about order. It is about force. It treats groundwater not as a shared public resource, but as private property tied to the land above it. It is often called the law of the biggest pump. A landowner can legally drill a well and pump as much water as they can physically extract from beneath their property, even if it drains their neighbor's well completely dry. As long as it is not malicious or deliberately wasteful, it is perfectly legal. There is no seniority. There is no sharing. There is only the race to the bottom. Above ground, a strict, orderly queue based on history. Below ground, a lawless free-for-all. For a century, this legal schizophrenia worked. Or, more accurately, there was enough water to mask the problem. But now, the water is running out. And this fundamental contradiction in Texas law is no longer a theoretical problem for law students. It is an active, unfolding disaster. And in 2011, during a drought that scorched the state to its foundations, Texans got their first terrifying glimpse of what happens when this system finally breaks. The year 2011 was a year of records Texas never wanted to break. It was the driest single year in the state's recorded history. Rivers shrank to trickles. Ranch ponds evaporated, leaving cracked mud mosaics where cattle used to drink. The heat was not just oppressive, it was biblical. And along the 840-mile stretch of the Brazos River, a slow-motion conflict that had been brewing for decades was about to erupt into open war. On one side was Dow Chemical, a global industrial giant whose massive Freeport complex, one of the largest integrated chemical manufacturing sites in the world, depended on a colossal amount of water drawn from the Brazos. Dow held some of the oldest, most senior water rights on the entire river, dating back to the state's earliest days of industrialization. Their right was near absolute. On the other side were thousands of farmers, rice growers, cotton farmers, cattle ranchers. Their families had worked this land for generations. Their water rights were also old, but in the rigid hierarchy of first in time, first in right, many of them were junior to Dow. For years, there was enough water for everyone. Dow took its share. The farmers took theirs. The system held. But by the summer of 2012, after a year of relentless drought, the Brazos River was failing. Flow rates dropped to historic lows, and Dow Chemical was not getting the water its senior permit guaranteed. So, it did what the law entitled it to do. It made a priority call. A priority call is the nuclear option in Texas water law. It is a formal demand made by a senior rights holder to the TSEC, the state regulator, to enforce the letter of the law, to cut off the junior users downstream so that the senior user can get their legally entitled share. In November of 2012, the TSEC, then chaired by Brian W. Shaw, did exactly that. They issued an unprecedented order, suspending more than 1,000 junior water rights along the Brazos River Basin. An entire agricultural economy, farms that had been passed down for generations, was cut off. Legally, by the book. Dow Chemical needed its water, and the law said they were first in line. But then the cheat did something else. Something that was not in the book. The order suspended the rights of farmers. It did not, however, suspend the rights of municipalities or power plants that were also junior to Dow. Cities like Sugar Land and Waco, and the power plants that kept the lights on for millions of Texans, were allowed to keep pumping water from the dwindling river. The state's reasoning was simple and terrifying. Cutting off water to cities and power grids would endanger public health and safety. So they just didn't do it. They broke their own foundational rule. In a direct choice between agriculture and urban survival, the state regulator chose the cities. This public welfare loophole set a chilling precedent. What do you think a state should prioritize in a crisis? Food or electricity? It's a debate happening in capitals right now. Drop your thoughts below. The Texas Farm Bureau sued immediately, claiming that SEC had illegally skipped over other junior users to unfairly punish agriculture. The legal battle raged for years, but the message was sent. The rule of first in time, first in right was not absolute. When the real crisis hit, when the choice was between turning off the taps in a city or shutting down a farm, the state had shown its hand. It would sacrifice the farmers. The oldest contract in Texas water law had been broken to keep the system from collapsing. It was a sign that the old rules were no longer sufficient for the new reality. And 1,600 miles to the south, in Corpus Christi, that new reality was about to become an outright emergency. The story of Corpus Christi is the story of Texas in miniature, a story of audacious ambition, explosive growth, and a profound gamble on a resource that was never guaranteed. The city's founders saw a deep-water bay and dreamed of a port that could connect Texas oil and gas to the world. They succeeded beyond their wildest imaginations. Today, the port of Corpus Christi is the nation's largest by total revenue tonnage and the single largest gateway for American crude oil exports. It is an industrial behemoth. But that behemoth is thirsty. Mega refineries, plastics plants, and liquefied natural gas terminals all require staggering amounts of fresh water for their cooling processes. To attract these industries, the city of Corpus Christi made a deal. It promised them cheap, plentiful water. For decades, that deal held. Lured by that promise, giants like ExxonMobil and Valero built sprawling complexes that became the backbone of the regional economy. But they were built on a water system designed in the 1950s for a smaller city and a wetter climate. Today, those industrial giants consume an estimated 55 to 60% of the city's entire municipal water supply. Over half the water is used not by residents in their homes, but by a handful of multinational corporations. And now, the bill for that deal is coming due. The reservoirs that supply the city, Choke Canyon and Lake Corpus Christi, are not just low. They are in a state of terminal decline, victims of a multi-year drought and a demand that has outstripped supply. As of this summer, Choke Canyon Reservoir was a ghost of itself. At just 8.3% capacity, it was functionally gone. The water that remained was difficult to access, the quality degrading. It was a warning sign, flashing in bright red. The other reservoir, Lake Corpus Christi, saw a temporary rebound after freak rains in May 2026, climbing from just 8% to around 28.5%. But city officials knew this was a reprieve, not a rescue. The underlying structural deficit was unchanged. A city of over 300,000 people and its industrial core were depending on reservoirs that were, for all practical purposes, empty or rapidly emptying again. This fight isn't just about corporations. It affects families. If you know someone living in a drought-prone area, or if you found this explanation valuable, please share this video with them and hit the like button. It helps get this critical information to more people. The result is a city at war with itself. On one side, you have residents who see their lawns turning brown and face impending mandatory water restrictions. On the other, you have industries whose very existence depends on that same dwindling supply. And, in the middle, is a controversial city policy that many residents see as a betrayal. It's called the Drought Surcharge Exemption Fee, or DSEF. It is a program that allows large industrial users to pay a slightly higher rate on their water year-round, just 31 cents per 1,000 gallons. In exchange for this fee, they are shielded from the catastrophic financial penalties that would normally be imposed during a declared drought emergency. Here's what they don't tell you. The program does not exempt industries from the physical water cuts. Officially, they still must curtail their usage alongside everyone else. But what it does do is function as a form of disaster insurance, paid for by the industries themselves, to prevent the kind of multi-million-dollar surcharges that could cripple their operations. To the average citizen, watching their water bill climb while being told to let their garden die. It looks like the city is letting corporations pay a pittance to play by a different set of rules. Isabel Ariza, a co-founder of the local advocacy group for the greater good, put the feeling bluntly: rage is not a strong enough word to capture how I feel. It blows my mind that we're more concerned with industry's profits in single-use plastics and jet fuel than centering the needs of the community. The crisis has become so acute that it has destabilized the city's government. Mayor Paulette Guajardo, who championed the industrial growth, is now facing heated removal proceedings initiated by her own city council, with hearings scheduled for this summer. The situation is so dire that even the state's top environmental regulator, Czech Chairwoman Brooke T. Popp, a figure not known for casual alarmism, delivered a shocking assessment in April 2026. Speaking at the University of Texas, she said, "Corpus Christi is running out of water. This is a shit show. We need to right this ship." The city's proposed solution is as audacious as it is controversial. A $1.3 billion seawater desalination project. The plan is to build plants that can turn the limitless water of the Gulf of Mexico into fresh water, primarily for industrial use. It is an engineering moonshot designed to break the city's dependence on its failing reservoirs. But the project is mired in conflict. Environmental groups are fiercely opposed, warning that discharging the highly concentrated brine left over from the desalination process will create a dead zone in Corpus Christi Bay, decimating the fragile ecosystem that underpins the region's fishing and tourism industries. Residents are outraged that they will be asked to shoulder the financial burden of a multi-billion-dollar project built not for them, but to supply water to private industry. It's a catch-22. To save the city from a water crisis, they may have to sacrifice the very bay that gives the city its name. This is the microcosm. The impossible choices, the legacy of promises made, and a changing climate that no longer honors them. And what is happening in Corpus Christi is a preview for the entire state, a warning of what happens when the math finally catches up, and there simply is not enough water to go around. The question that hangs over the city is the same one that haunted the Brazos River in 2012, when the final cut has to be made. Who goes first, the residents or the refineries? The crisis in Corpus Christi is not an isolated event. It is a symptom of a statewide disease. The combination of explosive population growth and shrinking water supplies has forced Texas to confront a future it is structurally unprepared for. The state's response has been to plan, to engineer, to spend. In April 2026, the Texas Water Development Board, or TWDB, the state's primary water planning agency, released its draft 2027 State Water Plan. The document is a sober, clear-eyed assessment of the state's predicament, and the number at its heart is staggering: $174 billion. That is the estimated cost to implement the water infrastructure strategies Texas needs to survive the next 50 years. To put that in terms that mean something, it is more than double the $80 billion price tag of the state's previous water plan from 2022. It is a number so large it reflects not an upgrade, but a desperate, wholesale reconstruction of the state's relationship with water. The plan, overseen by TWDB Chairwoman L'Oreal Stepney, calls for a massive new wave of projects, new reservoirs, new pipelines, advanced water recycling facilities, and a major investment in desalination, both for seawater on the coast and brackish groundwater inland. The need is driven by two brutal statistics. First, population. Texas is projected to grow from 34.2 million people in 2030 to 52.3 million by 2080, an 18 million person increase. Second, supply. Over that same period, the state's existing water supplies are projected to decline by 10% due to drought and aquifer depletion. More people, less water. Without the projects in the new plan, the TWDB projects a potential statewide water shortage of 5.8 million acre-feet by 2080. An acre-foot is enough water to cover 1 acre of land 1 foot deep, 5.8 million of them. Gone. It is a deficit so immense it threatens the state's entire economic model. This $174 billion plan is the state's official answer. And if you want to see our future breakdown of exactly where that money is going, you need to be subscribed. So if you haven't already, now's the time. The leadership core managing this crisis is a small, powerful group of figures appointed by Governor Greg Abbott, L'Oreal Stepney at the WDB, who handles the planning and financing, Brooke T. Popp at the SEC, who enforces the rules on the ground, and Kathleen Jackson, a former longtime WDB board member, now the interim chair of the Public Utility Commission of Texas, a crucial link between the state's water and energy grids. They are attempting to steer the ship through a hurricane, armed with a multi-billion-dollar plan and the power of the state. There have been moments of progress. In late May of 2026, the U.S. Supreme Court formally approved a settlement ending a bitter 13-year legal war between Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado over the Rio Grande. For years, Texas had argued that groundwater pumping in New Mexico was illegally siphoning off water from the river before it could reach Texas farmers and cities. The settlement, which was decades in the making, mandates new limits on New Mexico's pumping and formalizes a water-sharing agreement below the Elephant Butte Reservoir, giving Texas a 43% share of the irrigation water. It was a major victory, a rare piece of certainty in a chaotic system. But it was one river, one border, and an even bigger, more terrifying threat was emerging that nobody was talking about. A threat that wasn't even included in the state's brand new $174 billion plan. Data centers. The physical backbone of our digital world. The vast humming warehouses of servers that power everything from social media to streaming services to the artificial intelligence revolution. And they are flocking to Texas, drawn by cheap land, cheap power, and a business-friendly environment. These data centers have an insatiable appetite, not just for electricity, but for water. Millions upon millions of gallons are required every day for cooling the racks of high-performance servers. And the rise of AI is making the problem exponentially worse. Training a single large language model can consume a city's worth of water. The startling fact is this. The draft 2027 State Water Plan, the most expensive and comprehensive in Texas history, almost completely ignores this new titanic demand. It was written using data that did not account for the sheer scale of the AI boom. Projections now suggest that by 2040, data centers alone could consume up to 9% of Texas's total water use. That is more than the entire oil and gas industry. A whole new industrial sector, thirstier than anything that came before it, has appeared on the landscape. And the state's multi-billion-dollar survival plan doesn't even see it coming. The solution is already obsolete. The plan to fix the deficit of tomorrow is being undermined by a crisis that is arriving today. It proves that even the most ambitious engineering, the most expensive plans, may not be enough to outrun a future that is accelerating faster than our ability to prepare for it. The state is solving for the last drought, while the next one is being supercharged by a technological revolution it never anticipated. A system built on contradiction, a legal precedent that breaks under pressure, a city on the verge of collapse, and a future plan that is already blind to the biggest threat on the horizon. This is the state of water in Texas. The two laws, prior appropriation and the rule of capture, continue their slow-motion collision. The paradox that Texas copied from an 1800s Ohio court ruling, a rule that Ohio itself abandoned in 1984, still governs the fate of millions. Texas clings to the law of the biggest pump even as the wells run dry. The memory of the Brazos River in 2012 hangs over every discussion. It proved that when the system is truly stressed, the carefully written laws of seniority will be bent. The state will make a choice. A choice between food, cities, and industry. The current board at the SEC, led by Brooke Popp, will be the one to make that call on the next river that fails. And all signs point to that call coming sooner rather than later. In Corpus Christi, the drama plays out in real time. A city held hostage by its own economic success, forced to consider sacrificing its natural environment to quench the thirst of the industries it courted. Former water official Don Roach described the stakes in stark terms. Without lots and lots of rain, industry will be forced to shut down, if the industry shuts down. Who stays in Corpus without a job? This is an unprecedented disaster. It is a city that cannot survive without its industries, and whose industries cannot survive without water the city no longer has. I know, this is the third time I'm mentioning it, But our analytics show that maybe half of you watching are still not subscribed, and my producer is starting to give me the look. Please, for his sake and for the future of this channel, just click the button. It is free, and it saves me from another lecture about audience engagement metrics. Thank you. The final, unsettling truth is that no single solution will be enough. The Supreme Court can settle disputes on the Rio Grande. Mexico can repay its water debt under the 1944 treaty. Texas can spend $174 billion on new reservoirs and pipelines. But none of it solves the fundamental math problem. The state is getting hotter, the population is exploding, and a new invisible demand from the world of AI is about to dwarf everything that has come before. The question has never been more urgent. When the water is truly gone, when the reservoirs are empty and the rivers are dry, who gets cut off first? The law on the books provides one answer. The precedent from 2012 provides another. The economic reality provides a third. Texas built its identity on limitless growth, on wide open spaces and boundless resources. That era is over. The state is now entering a new age, an age of limits, an age of hard choices. The permits have been issued. The pumps are still running. But somewhere